Excellent. All right. Welcome, everybody, to this week's Professional Development Lunch Talk. This week, we are going to be going over science outreach. We're going to be speaking to GMU Physics Department students and alumni who've started their own outreach efforts and covering other types of outreach. And they'll give you some advice on how to get started on your own. So just primarily to get everything started, science outreach is obviously very important, not just in being able to communicate your research, but to get people more interested in science and hopefully to join the field. And there are lots of ways that you can make science accessible and interesting. So let me just share my screen real fast. Some of the ways that if you are interested in science outreach, or if you're interested in attending or participating, whichever, there are two different ways you can do that. One of the ways is Astronomy on Tap. So this is a talk series where people give talks in a very accessible level. Jokes are appropriate. It's very casual. And they happen in public bars in DC. They're hosted by Steph Lamassa, and actually one of our own grad students, Ryan Fifley, has given a talk there, and we can send out the YouTube recording of said talk later. There are also DC Science Comedy Nights, which are run by the DC Science Writers Association. So there you see several comedians, storytellers, authors, etc., many of whom have a science background and are great at communicating said science with humor and livette in order to get the public interested and involved in science. These are hosted by Kasha Patel, and for both the Astronomy on Tap and DC Science Comedy Nights, you can see the links there. Astronomy on Tap is actually national. It's not just for the for DC. And unfortunately, I don't know what happened with them with COVID, but I'm sure they'll be back relatively soon. So with that brief introduction, I'm going to turn over the floor. John, I believe you have to leave a little bit earlier. So let me go ahead and, okay.
Yeah, because I have to teach at 12:30.
Great, so the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. During my postdoc is when I first really started getting into doing astronomy actively. I bought a 14-inch Dobsonian reflector, and I brought it to Daryl's house, and which is under Bortle 5 skies. And that was like the first time like I really remember. I mean, I've looked through big telescopes before, like the GMU 32-inch Ritchie Cretan and so forth. But it was really when I started looking through decent telescopes under darker skies that I was just blown away. I wanted to share this with my friends and family and even everyone else in the world. And so I found that the only way to get these images to people who were far away was to take pictures so I could text or email them. So that's sort of how I got started in astrophotography, and it was sort of a slippery slope. And so I started doing astrophotography pretty regularly in my own front yard here, which is right by GMU actually. And people would drive by on their way after work to like pick up their kids from soccer practice, and a minivan would pull over and be like, "Hey, what are you looking at? What's going on?" And can I go pick up my girls and bring them back and look through? I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And it just kept happening every night. Multiple people. I made many friends, like close friends. Made professional contacts, and mostly I spread the beauties of the cosmos, corny as it may sound, to people. And I realized what I was doing was was sort of like that saying you may have heard of: rockets bring you to the cosmos, telescopes bring the cosmos to you. And so I was showing people throughout their lives what was and it occurred to me that I was getting more people interested in astronomy, and that there are more people interested in astronomy than I thought. But I wanted to bring And so I wanted to do public outreach in a more official capacity. And so in order to do so, I wanted to bring structure to it, and bring the reliability of the frequency with which I would do so, because it was just sort of random and haphazard, waiting for people to stop by as they saw me out in my front yard. So I started doing official volunteer work at Sky Meadows State Park for the Astronomy for Everyone, a Star Party program. It's out west of here, about an hour, near Delaplane. But they're only held once a month on the Saturday closest to new moon. And so it's because the weather is so cloudy, betting on it being clear 1 month on that specific one night of a month was very rare. So we ended up only meeting maybe 3 to 5 times a year. But when we did set up, my duties would include setting up my gear and having people look through it, helping other people set up their telescopes, people that sometimes just got a telescope for Christmas. Like sometimes in January, we would show up and people just have all these new telescopes and they don't know how to use them or know what to look for. Oh, you know, I look through it and I just see darkness and I can't see Jupiter. I'm like, well, you're a couple degrees off. Let me show you how to more reliably get your target in view, in your field of view. I would also give presentations, and I was also featured in the park newsletter saying John Crone wearing many hats, dot, 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 because I did a bunch of stuff. So it's a lot of fun. And so I wanted to say that when people do get that big galaxy or globular cluster or planet in the 14-inch view or whatever telescope we're using at the time, you get a lot of oohs and ahs, more than you might even have on 4th of July during the fireworks. So some of the things I do to make the content more interesting to the public is to sort of replace their preconceptions and about the night sky, and also show them how easy it is to do on a budget at home with little time to spare in their busy schedules, some basic astronomy with their kids. But rampant light pollution, of course, makes only the few brightest dozen stars visible from the suburbs, and maybe the moon and some of the brightest planets. And so people don't really think that there's anything else up there. They don't even look up. And I don't really blame them, you know, because it's just like there's not a whole lot there, just a few stars. But people hardly ever even bother looking up. And so when I show them through my telescope or show them pictures of nebula I've taken from right where I'm standing right by GMU with all these bright street lamps, like, you know, 10 yards away, they're just blown away. And you could hear in the tone of their voice the sort of the fact that they've just learned something. And because they usually start out by talking to me saying, hey, what must be the occasion? What big, rare astronomical event is happening? And to me, that implied that they think that there has to be something special going on for me to even bother looking up with my big telescopes. But I tell them the universe is out every night and it's always got a lot to show. And so they're just like, huh, I never thought of it that way. And so that's one of the things I do to make things more interesting and accessible to people, is to just show them what's up there and show them how you could pretty easily with even a 3 to 5 inch reflector from your front yard or backyard see some pretty cool stuff like the moon, the planets, and some globular clusters. Lastly, if you'd like to make your own YouTube channel or podcast to start putting out science content, I would first recommend you organize your thoughts and determine what your audience is, your intended audience, and their level of advancement, the primary topics, themes, and messages you'd like to deliver. Just sort of do some soul searching, so to speak, and organize your thoughts and figure out what it is you really want to do. And once you're organized, make sure you have a good camera. You can start with just your cell phone, but I would recommend finding a way to mount it on a tripod so that you're not holding it at arm's length and recording these videos, which I admit I did. And don't. It's better to have a tripod, trust me. And then you could later upgrade the camera and microphone. I would recommend installing the free software known as Shotcut, which will help you edit and mix together episodes, your recordings, and edit music into it and put neat transitions and make it look kind of professional and creative. Lastly, actually, if you ever have to give a talk and you're trying to battle nerves, the advice I would give on that is the following. Well, I never get nerves while talking to the public, so I don't have a whole lot of experience with that because I really enjoy talking to people. Even in grade school and high school, when I would have to give a class presentation, I was actually always the class clown in grade school and high school. And so I don't really have a whole lot of experience with that, but I can say just enjoy it and remember that people are always very friendly and courteous. They're not going to trample you. You don't need to picture them in their underwear. So just keep in mind that when you're talking at an event, the people that came here specifically to hear you talk, and so they're not going to like interrupt or boo you off stage or do anything or throw like oranges at you or tomatoes. So just take a deep breath and have fun. And also it doesn't hurt to show some pretty pictures depending on what the content is, the context of your talk. You might be talking about astronomy. Because pretty pictures of the universe are always a crowd pleaser. And by the end of your talk, you'll be hearing plenty of oohs and ahs, like it might have been the 4th of July. So have fun with it and remember to always keep looking up. Thank you for your time.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all of that, John. We did get a question that I'll just go ahead and ask from our form. So somebody asked, how expensive is it to get into astrophotography? Is there a quote unquote cheaper way to do it without spending hundreds and thousands of dollars?
Yes and no. Astrophotography is the art of spending as much money as you can, but getting back so much more, and like priceless things in your life. That having been said, there are ways to do it that are more affordable. For example, I would highly recommend you get a free account on an astronomy forum called cloudynights.com. They have a classified section, and I have just made so many amazing purchases there. I bought a $500 camera for $80. I bought a $675 coma corrector for $200. You could buy some of the basic gear you need, like a DSLR camera, which retail for like hundreds or 1,000 or more, like a Canon. Don't get a Nikon, trust me. I could explain why later, but a Canon T3i or T2i is like the world over the number one camera for starting out, and you could get them for like 100 or 200 bucks and free shipping. And you just go into this classified ad on cloudynights.com and look through at all the stuff they have. I've saved so much money, and it really helped me get started. So you'll want a Canon DSLR. Make sure it's what's called Astro Modified. That's where you remove the IR cut filter in front of the sensor, because these are intended for terrestrial photography by the manufacturer, you know, birthday parties and lawn chairs by a pool and all that stuff. And so they have this IR cut filter, but that cuts out a lot of the reds from the hydrogen glowing gases and nebulae of the universe. And so you lose a lot of sensitivity unless it's modified. It costs about $200 or $300 to get it modified. But if you buy it from an astronomer who already had it modified and you're not paying for it to be modified already, it's already done, and you're getting it for $100 or $200, you save more money on that process itself. So definitely great deals on there, and you could get some telescopes and tripods and mounts for great deals. And one of the good things about astrophotography, although it has so many different components, it allows you to buy all the gear in stages. It's not like you just drop, like let's say you're going to spend $1,000 over several months, because it's kind of unavoidable because there's so many different parts. You don't just drop $1,000 because you don't have it, and so you just buy the gear in stages and familiarize yourself with things as you get them. Buy the camera first, start taking pictures in the day and at night, just handheld. Get the software and start playing with pictures, downloading onto your computer and stuff like that, and then just do it in stages. And you could also email me if you have any more questions about these details as you go throughout the process later in the coming weeks and months.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That was a lot of really awesome information. Honestly, I'm probably going to start using that info. I didn't know there was like a Craigslist for astronomers, but good to know. Um, Fantastic. Well, thank you so much again, John. Next up, we will turn to Professor Sauer, if you would like to go ahead and speak to your outreach.
Great. Thank you for letting me. It's going to be quite short. I've been involved with a program known as Focus at Mason. It runs out of Mason. It's called Female of Color and those underrepresented in STEM programs. So it's known that women around the middle school and the high school get sort of uninterested. And the idea is to make it fun and exciting for them to be reinterested in it. I don't run this program. Kelly Knight runs this program. Here's a picture of Kelly Knight to the left and all the students. This year, unfortunately, it's going to go virtual. It's in August, August from the 2nd to the 6th and 9 to 13. So again, middle school and high school. The most important thing is enthusiasm with the students to sort of get the enthusiasm passed on to them. We've had a good experience in the past with them. These are student-leds, and here student-led workshops. So you might know Aaron Escobar, who did it 2 years ago, and Paul McShane did it right, and they did a nice workshop on campus for the students. This year, I've got 2 students, Abby Harris and Leith Benali. You may know them, who are going to develop and lead the workshops. And what I'm looking for right now, if you're interested, is I'm looking, 1, for enthusiasm, excitement about physics, and 2, I'm looking for people to do help with the workshops, because we're going to have 24 students, and virtual is kind of bad, especially if you imagine you've got middle schoolers. So an hour and a half with 24 middle schoolers. We've got 3 people, but even those are very good. So I'm hoping to get more people involved so the breakout groups can be small. So again, the enthusiasm can catch. And so I've got a bit of support from the National Science Foundation on this. And so I can give $250 for people who are willing to participate. And this is just to participate, not in development, because the 2 students already are doing development, but to do actually the workshops. There would need to be on campus so that we can look over each other and help each other if it's not working out so well. So that will be in campus, but it's not a huge time commitment. And if you're interested, please contact me. It's the people who've done it before, it's usually been eye-opening for, and they usually come back pretty excited. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That sounds like a really fantastic program. And I wish I'd known it was around when I was in middle school. So one question, just in case anybody's going to watch this later and might have the same question. What level of experience is preferable in the major, in the department? Should they be junior, senior, or?
I don't think it really matters, because the leads are juniors. And so the leads are going to develop the workshop and then sort of pass on their knowledge. So I think it can be any level, because we're really going to, the leads will teach the experiment to the people who are helping. And then we'll go ahead and teach it to everybody together. And we'll be trying to do it in the same socially distance, but in the same room. We'll troubleshoot it, make sure it works, and then do it together on that day. So the level doesn't need to be extremely high. The enthusiasm part is the most important. I particularly find that students, well, this is true of my own kids, they're more interested in what undergraduates have to say than what I have to say, because I look like their mom. So the enthusiasm part, like I said, is the most key piece. Bye, John.
Well, wonderful. Thank you, John. And thank you so much, Professor Sauer. Hopefully we get some enthusiastic undergrads for this. We'll also put out the information, any information that anybody shares, we'll put it out into the undergraduate physics Discord and hopefully catch people there if they don't catch the recording of this video. And with that, Laura, the floor is yours. You can go ahead and start talking about your initiatives.
Thank you, Natasha. Hey, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Laura, and I was a George Mason student. I studied physics and computer science, and throughout my undergraduate degree here at George Mason, I had the opportunity to work on a research project studying supermassive black holes by applying machine learning algorithms. I was a Goldwater scholar and also was an intern for CERN virtually. and I decided to attend graduate school. So I applied this year to graduate schools and decided to attend UC Berkeley for fall 2022. I decided to defer by a year. And currently what I'm trying to do science communication. And the way that I do this is through my Instagram page. So I have an Instagram page that's bilingual. I communicate science in both language, in Arabic and English. And I share some popular topics, like topics about the double slit experiment and dark matter and black holes. And I share in both Arabic and English, and also share some of my lifestyle and my life story. And I think this is something that people are gravitated towards because they don't just want to learn the science, but they want to know how you got into it and where you are in your life in that career. In addition to that, I also have a podcast called the Mesopotamian Star Show podcast. And currently it's only in English. And what I talk about is, my first podcast was about black holes. So type of black holes and what happens if you fall into a black hole. And the second one was about wave particle duality. So talking about the double slit experiment and some history, giving some history there for that podcast. And now I'm gonna move ahead and kind of answer some of the questions that Jenna sent out in the email. So the first question that I'm going to answer is that, how did I get into this? So personally, if I look back at when I was in high school, I got interested in physics and astronomy through watching documentaries and reading popular books. And then when I talked to my classmates about how they got interested in physics and astronomy, it was kind of similar story. So I think people get interested in physics and astronomy through those science communicators. That's why I think science communication is so important. And for us, if we have a lack of science communicators, and I think we have a lack of women who are in physics and who are science communicators. And I think to address that gap, being a woman and doing science communication is very important. And there's also an additional lack of people who are Arabic speaking, who are in physics. So in addition to that, just communicating this content in Arabic, I think is very, very important. And when I talk to people from my community, I see the curiosity, I see the interest, I see the willingness to learn, but I don't see a lot of tools. When I go online and try to Google for documentaries, there are plenty available ones in English, but not in Arabic. And this is something that I want to do in the future. I want to push on that and create more content in Arabic. So people from different nationalities, people who are specifically Arabic speaking, can join that community. The second question that I'm going to answer is that, why did you choose those specific platforms? So I chose, for example, Instagram instead of Twitter, because that's what the younger generation tends to have and be more familiar with. I personally don't use Twitter, but I know a lot of people who are maybe a few years older than me that use Twitter. But most of the people that I know that are like my age or a little bit younger, they tend to use Instagram. And Instagram has a lot of really cool options. Like you can create stories, you can share a photo, you can have a post, a link, and this is something that I use too. Like I would create a story, talk to my audience like face to face and post it, and people can comment on it and reply to it. And I think it's a really cool tool to have that, for example, Twitter doesn't have. So this is why I'm using Instagram. And as for podcasts, it's also because it's what I use too. I think, when you're busy and you're always on the go, I personally don't really have a lot of time to sit and watch a video. So I gravitate more towards listening to audiobooks or to listen to podcasts. And I think nowadays more and more people are getting busier and busier, and having podcasts that kind of runs in the background while you do your tour, while you drive, while you're relaxing. I think it's very good. I think it's going to be more and more useful and more popular in the future. That's why I chose to use those two platforms. And one more question. How do I make my content interesting to the public. I think, when I first started, I used to share a lot of science, and people wanted to know more about me and my lifestyle. So I started to share more about me, like my hobbies, what I'm doing, which school I'm going to, what kind of research or problems I'm working on. Just also give like some background about my history, like how I got into it. And one of the most popular posts that I have on my Instagram is the one that I talked about how after graduating high school, I got rejected from all universities, and then how I worked hard to be where I am today, fast forward, going to graduate school at UC Berkeley. And that was a very powerful post, and people were very interested, and this is something that people want to see. It really inspires them to not just in physics, but in their careers as well. And last question, what advice do you have for people who want to do science communication? Well, one advice is to stay consistent, and I'm not consistent, just to put that out there. I'm not consistent myself, but it's very important to stay consistent. People want to see you and want to see your content, and once you kind of fall off that, they forget about you. So this is really important to do. And also just look at your community and see where there is lack and try to monopolize that. For example, I saw the lack in Arabic speaking community, and I saw the lack in women being science communicators, and I tried to bridge that gap by becoming that person. And also don't be afraid to share your story and share more aspects of yourself, because people really want to get to know you as well. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Laura, for sharing that. This is great. This is all great stuff, and very inspiring for anybody who's looking to get into it themselves. So a couple of questions that we got from the form. How much prep work goes into each episode or post?
I think for a post, it's less work than a podcast. So for a post, I would say maybe a couple hours. You want to select what you want to talk about, and you want to make sure that what you're writing about is correct and accurate. So you have to go back and do some research and make sure what you're saying is correct. So I would say a couple hours for a post. And also I translate all of my posts to Arabic. So when there is an English part, there is an Arabic part. So that, doing the translation also takes some time. So let's say 5 hours total. As for podcasts, it takes a long time, because I would write like 5 pages of script, and then that would be just 15 minutes of podcast, which is very, very short. So, writing this 5 pages and trying to go back and also make sure that your content is accurate, that takes, for me, it would take me like a week, because I also have a job. So I would try to work on it like a couple hours every day for a week. And then the recording and the editing part, actually that isn't very time consuming. So that would be maybe a total of also a couple of hours. So it takes longer to do the podcast than the posts.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah, it's a lot of work to get everything done. It's definitely a time commitment to undertake this. So one other question from the form. How much of what you talk about goes beyond whatever you learned in your classes?
I think a lot. So what we learn in classes, we learn a lot of math, and you learn how to solve equations and to solve problems. And when you do science communication, you can't really do a lot of that. You have to really like communicate content rather than the mathematics part. And there's like always a sweet spot. Like you have to make sure that you're communicating science, but not too much of it. So as I'm creating those posts and those podcasts, I'm actually learning. I'm constantly learning. So whenever I create something, I would go and do some research, and I learn something new. So I'm constantly learning, and I'm learning a lot from it. But I think having this background, this physics background, is very helpful, because you always have this like moment where it clicks for you, like, oh, I understand this equation now. I understand why we worked on this problem now. So it's very rewarding to see that.
Excellent. Professor Sauer, I see that you have your hand raised. You can go ahead.
Yeah, Laura, the podcast that you were talking about, where you talk about getting into the undergraduate, could you share that? And maybe I'm not on Discord, so maybe you can email it to me, because I think the students from Focus really should hear what you have to say. And maybe I can share it to them some way or another, because that's exactly the kind of message. And you're right. Most of the students who come to Focus, they're more interested in the people's stories than they are about the science.
So I just typed in the chat my podcast, so in my podcast, I just share the science, but in my Instagram page, I share my story. So I'm going to also share my Instagram. And I can share it as well on Discord.
Okay. Now again, I show my age. I don't have an Instagram account. So is there any way possible
share with the students
that I can show the students, because I don't have an Instagram? I'm sorry, I'm so out of date.
Laura, isn't your Instagram public? It's not private, right?
Yeah, it's public.
Yeah, so then it can be seen, even if you just Google her handle and then Instagram, you would still be able to see it. You just wouldn't be able to like or comment on her posts or something.
Okay, so again, my ignorance. So if I Google what she just put in the post, will I find it?
Yes, you should be able to find it. Yep.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
Yeah, and you have my email, so if you have any question, just email me and I will walk you through that. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much again, Laura, for your time. This is great and a lot of amazing information for anyone looking to maybe start their own podcast or Instagram or what have you. So this is great. And now I'll turn over the floor to Kat to discuss her outreach efforts as well.
Thanks. So I'm a second-year graduate student in the department, and I got into my outreach smashing the STEM/physics system also on Instagram's platform, because there's a lot of power in transparency. So a lot of higher education is regularly gatekept, and folks from marginalized groups have to face so many extra barriers to have a chance at reaching the same place as those in the majority. So many folks like me have faced these barriers, and I felt it was time to kind of shine a light on them, call for change, and try to better pave the way for underrepresented folks to enter and remain in STEM or physics. And I think that this does take the power away from, folks who are perpetuating these discriminatory and sometimes stereotypical behaviors. And it pushes back on the brilliance narrative that we talk a lot about in Spectrum, because we do belong here and we have a lot to offer. So for the most challenging parts of my work, diving into these topics is usually pretty mentally and emotionally exhausting, especially since a lot of them involve reliving difficult experiences that I faced. But I do know that it's worth it, because in my mind, it increases the chances of it not continuing to happen to other folks. So while it is exhausting, it's also sometimes therapeutic to release some of it and not let my experiences hold that same power over me. And I do have tons of fun playing with Canva and using different templates, which kind of overlaps into how I make the content interesting. So I'll try to screen share if I can.
Yeah, you should have screen share. There it goes.
Let's see if it works. Okay, so can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
It's kind
it's
kind of fuzzy somehow.
I think it might be because I'm screen sharing from my iPad. I don't know how to fix that problem. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So these are some of the topics that I'm covering in my series, and this is sort of a mock-up of what it would look like on my Instagram story, except the image is bigger and in this case, I guess sharper. So these are the topic banners that I have, and each week I make a post on some of the subtopics. So depending on how much time I have, I might cover, like, for example, the first one that says STEM Physics Grad School, I might do a post about every single topic in there. Or if I want to go really in-depthly into a few of them, then I'll just pick two and I'll say, stay tuned for more. And then these are also some additional topics that I cover. And I do try to remain approachable and open to feedback. So I regularly add questions that are sort of like, let me know if there's something you'd like to see, or if I didn't address something that's really important to you, because again, making sure that everyone's voice is heard is really important to me. So I do try to ask questions to the audience as much as I can. So for advice that I have, as a side note, I had thought about doing something like this for a while, and lots of other folks asked me to do it as well, but I never really had the time to start a huge undertaking. Like at times I thought about like writing a book or a business or like starting a blog or something. So I figured I would start in the capacity that I can handle. So that's my advice. If you're interested in, you know, doing outreach things, to just start in whatever capacity that is. And then you can build on the progress, and don't be afraid to use your voice. You can take an inventory of what time you have available for it and come up with like a plan or a goal. It doesn't have to be very complicated. So I typically post on Saturdays, and then I prep on Fridays or throughout the week if I'm inspired / if I have time to. It is a lot of work, but there's a lot of good that comes out of it. And then lastly, for like handling nerves, I give myself pep talks all the time, which I know sounds a little weird, but if I'm like feeling myself getting anxious or stressed from doing this, I try to check in with myself and I ask like, what's triggering it? And usually it's apprehension about how speaking out on these topics will be taken by certain folks. But then I do remind myself that that's exactly why I started this, and I have survived 100% of my worst days. So like nothing bad to that extent can come from this. And then I click post and I move on. So I try to keep my eye on the goal and get encouragement from my support system. And I guess the one SparkNotes takeaway is to use your voice even if it shakes. And that's all I got. So I'll stop screen sharing.
That's great. Thank you so much, Kat. So we have a question in the form. So how do you pick which sensitive topics to discuss?
That's a tough one. So before like I officially started this, I kind of like went back and I dug through like so many conversations and all this stuff. But I asked people that I knew were either still in academia or people that left academia because of how toxic it was. So I asked them what topics they wish that they would have seen, or for the example of students that are still, you know, undergrads or whatever, I asked them what they would like me to talk about. And it's difficult because for example, I think one of my mentees or an undergrad asked me to talk about like LGBTQ issues in STEM. So I felt kind of some pressure that I had to like do it justice. So that took me a lot more time because I wanted to make sure that my research that I did and what I was presenting was like representative. But yeah, it just depends. Sometimes people just like randomly send me messages and ask for topics, or based off of like stuff that I've gone through, I figured that it would be helpful to talk about it. So it just kind of depends.
Awesome, thank you so much. And then just one other question about how many hours per week do you think you spend on prepping the content and then making the content?
I think, I know it sucks to say it depends so much, but it does. When I started this, I kind of went through Canva and I spent like at least 15-20 hours finding templates that I liked that were kind of in the same theme. So that took me some time, but now I think it takes around 5 hours, but if it's like a very involved topic, then it could take up to 10 a week.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for telling us. So for anyone watching, you know, if you want to get into science communication, it's going to take a time effort here. It's a time commitment to do it well. So with the remaining time that we have left, I'll just open up the floor. If anyone has any questions they want to ask, the question form is in the chat as well. If you want to submit something anonymously, or if anybody has any suggestions or questions to our speakers. Thank you very much to all of our speakers for giving us their time and their presentation. We appreciate it more than we can say. Joe, go ahead. I see your hand raised.
Thanks. This question is for Lara. I was just wondering if you could tell us a bit more about the documentary in Arabic that you're planning.
It's not a documentary. I'm planning a podcast in the future. So currently in my podcast, it's only in English. But the idea for me when I first started making podcasts, I wanted to do bilingual podcasts. So whatever I communicate in English, I wanted to have that version in Arabic as well. And I think later on, like 5 years from now, I do have a plan of creating like documentaries, but that's not for now thing. That's when I become a doctor. Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And if anyone has any last minutes, you can speak now or forever hold your peace. Otherwise, thank you again just so very much to all of our speakers for all of your information and advice. Hopefully students can either use your platforms to start their own platforms and find their voices, or learn more from all of you. So thank you very much for all of your efforts.
Thank you, Natasha.